morning, dear ladies and gentlemen, both present here in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the Republic of Latvia and also those watching us online on the internet. And my name is Māris Anģēns. I'm the research fellow of the Latvian Institute of International Affairs and I'm also assistant professor at Riga Students University. And I have the pleasure and privilege to be the moderator for the first panel of the discussion today. And the title of the panel is called China CEEC Cooperation Format as a Bridge Between China and the European Union. And in the panel we will address several issues that will comprise the relationship between China, the European Union and the 16+1 format. And we will try to seek answers to such issues as what are the achievements and challenges of the 16+1 format. Are there more challenges or achievements or maybe other issues? And what lessons can be learned from the deliverables that we have achieved so far in this format? Secondly, we will discuss on what are the perspectives of this cooperation format in bridging the gap between the European Union and China. So the European Union, as we know, that we have 11 member states of the 16+1 formats in the European Union, but the rest are not in the European Union. So the 16+1 format is a bridge between the EU and China. And we will also seek answers to issues, what are the possible synergies in some concrete fields, like in EU-China strategic partnership and the format. And last but not least, we will address also issues related to China's engagement with other global actors here active in Europe, apart from the European Union. But before we start the discussion, I would like to introduce all the speakers. And I will start from my far right, Mr. Ellis Matthews, who is representing the European External Action Service, so one of the institutions of the European Union. And Mr. Matthews is the head of the division that is responsible for the relationship with China. And he has quite a wide experience in the EU institutions, and before he joined the European Union institutions, he worked for the United Kingdom Department of Trade and Industry. Welcome, Mr. Matthews.
Good morning.
Next, we have Professor Kong Tianping. He is representing the Institute of European Studies of the Chinese Academy of Social Sciences, where he is a senior research fellow. And he has previously been a visiting scholar and professor also in Central European countries, so he has quite a good knowledge also on the region. And then his research interests relate to different aspects of the cooperation of economic aspects between the CEEC and China and also the European Union. And next on my left I have another representative from China. If Mr. Kong is coming from Beijing, then Dr. Long Jin, she comes from Shanghai. She represents the Shanghai Institute for International Studies, and there she serves as the Deputy Director of the Center for European Studies. And previously she has worked also with public diplomacy issues, for example, for the China-United States Exchange Foundation, and she also has quite an extensive research background, and also she has particularly researched the relationship between Central Eastern European countries and China. Then further on my left is Mr. Sheber Marton from Hungary. He is the director of the Institute for Foreign Affairs and Trade based in Budapest. And before he joined the institute as the director, he has worked both in private sector and also in the public administration of Hungary. He also had held leading posts in the Ministry of National Development of Hungary. And last but not least, on my far left, we have Mr. Aap Neljas, who is currently senior researcher at the Estonian Foreign Policy Institute. And it's important to mention that he was previously member of Riigikogu, the national parliament of Estonia, for many years. And he has also quite a wide, extensive experience being a diplomat. He has served in different posts and also in the United States of America, the embassy of Estonia in the United States, and also in the mission to the United Nations. And we will soon have the input statements of each of the speakers, and afterwards we will have the questions and answers session. And then those who are watching us online and those who are present here in the audience will have the opportunity to ask questions or to deliver some comments that you would like to be addressed by the panelists. And if you are watching us online and would like to issue a statement or comment or a question, so please follow us on Twitter and Facebook, and please deliver your comments order. But I would like to stop my intervention here, and I would like to give the floor to the first speaker of this panel, Mr. Matthews. Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much indeed, and thank you to the organisers for the invitation to come here and speak to this gathering. And I also ought to say that it's very kind of you to allow me to speak first, since I come from the European Union institutions, the European External Action Service, and the European Union itself is not a member of the 16+1. We're present at the leaders' meetings and the national coordinators' meetings in an observer capacity as guests of the European Union member states that belong to it, and of China too. So I think our participation is recognised as useful. It's very kind of you to allow me to speak first. And I'm going to do the traditional thing that you're taught to at school and university in the UK, which is to dispute the question slightly, I think. You talked about a bridge and a gap. I mean, I don't think we would perceive that there's a gap between the EU and China. I mean, all of the member states that belong to the European Union and also belong to the 16+1 format, have a direct relationship with China both bilaterally and via the European Union. We, the institutions, are there to serve the member states in doing that. So I think we would talk more in terms of complementarity and synergy than in terms of bridges and gaps, but that's semantics, if you like. I think it might be worth just taking a look at the state of play of EU-China relations and perhaps thinking about how, if you like, the overall EU-China framework is relevant to some of the things that are going to be discussed today and will be discussed then again at the business summit and between the leaders tomorrow. And what I'd like to draw people's attention to is the fact that the European Union has adopted a new strategy on China that had two components. A joint communication coming from the High Representative, my boss, Mrs. Mogherini, and from the Commission that was issued on the 22nd of June, and a set of Council conclusions endorsing that strategy, and that was issued on the 18th of July. And those two things are designed to update and to reinforce the EU's relations with China. And I'd like to point to four things in that updated approach. The first, and I think this is very relevant to this format, which is mainly economic in focus, is to say that we maintain a very high level of ambition on trade and investment. That's centred around the immediate objective of a comprehensive agreement on investment between the EU and China, but also on things like innovation, the knowledge-based economy, IPR protection, those kind of things. And there's a chapter of the communication that deals with that in quite some detail. The second thing, perhaps a little bit less the substance of today's discussions, but important because it's part of the very wide scope of EU-China relations and one of the ways in which the relationship has matured very considerably over the past 10 years since we last did an EU strategy exercise towards China. And that's looking for new opportunities for closer EU-China cooperation on foreign policy and security challenges in places which we both recognise risks for global security, so be it Afghanistan, be it Syria, be it peace building in Africa. So that's the second component. A third is a reinforced partnership on tackling global challenges, the obvious ones, climate change, overseas development, but also things like the oceans, energy, and reform and adaptation of global governance based on international law and rules. That's a third important component. And the final thing is not really a policy in itself, but a principle which is about making the relationship function well for both sides, and that's establishing reciprocity basically as one of the main watchwords in the relationship. And there's a big debate about that on the trade side in Europe at the moment. You can see it a lot in the newspapers, but what we mean by that is equality of treatment, mutual openness and mutual benefit. So some of the things that the introductory speakers were also pointing to. Secondly, what I'd like to say in terms of the policy framework is that we have agreed between the EU-China a very comprehensive joint action plan. It goes under the code word Agenda 2020. That was agreed back in 2013, so it pre-exists the EU strategy on China, and the implementation of that is well underway. This year we've had already an EU-China summit in Beijing in July, a high-level economic and trade dialogue in October in Brussels. And again, that was bringing up a number of, I think, basic policy initiatives which are very relevant for the work that's done in the 16+1. The first is the one that I already mentioned, a comprehensive agreement on investment. Why would this be important? Because if we're going to have a balanced look at connectivity, we should be talking not only about Chinese investment in Europe, which we very much welcome, but about European investment and participation in China, including the big part of One Belt, One Road, which is about the development of China's western provinces. And the next stage in the investment agreement is to go towards consolidating the text and exchanging market access offers. And that's really one of the flagship initiatives in EU-China relations. And obviously, if we could conclude an ambitious agreement, which would include both investment protections and significant market access improvements, that would, as a framework condition for the work that's being done in the 16+1, be very important. A second, I would mention, because I noticed that throughout the history of 16+1 documents, there's an agricultural strand, would be a geographical indications agreement. So high-value agriculture, brand names in agriculture, if you like, and that's well underway and should be not far from signature, and Commissioner Hogan was talking about this to Vice Premier Markay on the 18th of October when he was in Brussels. So if we could do that, it would do an awful lot to expedite what could be exported from Europe eastwards along the New Silk Road. And there are many countries in the 16+1 belonging to the European Union whose meat exports, for instance, don't have proper access to the Chinese market at the moment, and that's something that we should be fixing, sanitary and phytosanitary standards, if we want that seamless trade facilitated band of cooperation across the Eurasian continent. And finally, I'll point to something. I know that Matthew Baldwin, my colleague from DG Move, will talk about this a little bit later, but we are working on trying to find better synergies between the European Fund for Strategic Investments and One Belt, One Road, and that is going in a strand of cooperation largely between DG ECFIN in Brussels and the NDRC in Beijing. So those are some framework things. If I look at the draft Riga guidelines for adoption tomorrow and the draft declaration on so-called 3Cs cooperation, perhaps four things I could raise where I can see some specific areas of commonality with the EU-China agenda. Undoubtedly, the biggest is obviously connectivity, and this is set out very clearly in the EU strategy on China. So the aim is to identify via a vehicle that we call the EU-China Connectivity Platform ways in which we can connect the Eurasian continent via a physical and digital network. So far, 7 projects identified at each end in China and in the European Union. There are more member states wanting to nominate projects for that exercise, so that's good. I think it's gathering momentum. And the aim is to proceed eventually, and it'll take a bit of time because it's complicated. There are lots of complex legal and financial issues, but to proceed to a kind of project-by-project examination where we would bring the key companies, the key financial institutions, the key member states around the table, obviously with their Chinese counterparts, to try and draw in additional investment to the projects that are identified. It's mainly about transport connectivity at the moment. Very important to what was said this morning about that needing to include the seas as well as the continental links if we want a balanced approach. And ultimately, I think we should be aiming, but I'm now looking very far forward. The policy isn't established on this, but we ought to be looking at, I think, identifying transport corridors that would build the TEN-T outwards to the east, and if you like, come up with a map and a network rather than the current patchwork. The second thing I'd like to point to is people-to-people exchanges. We could think about that as another kind of connectivity and cultural exchanges. This would include things like visa facilitation at the EU level, educational and research exchanges, and cultural and creative industries and tourism. So I think that's something that we could look at, and one of the initiatives that we're looking at under the EU's new China strategy is to reinforce the high-level people-to-people dialogue that we have with China, and I think that would present many synergies with what's being done in the 16+1 as well. The third would be tourism. The EU-China summit in July agreed that 2018 would be the EU-China tourism year. I think that would provide an opportunity to boost tourism between China and the EU and vice versa. I can see that there's already work going on improving air connections between many Central and Eastern European capitals and China. But we ought to be looking also at synergies, for instance, with the European Year of Cultural Heritage in 2018, and ideas like twinning cities of culture in East Asia and Europe. So that may be another area that we can think about. And finally, I would point to the work that's being done on the blue economy. There's an EU-China Maritime Year of Cooperation coming up next year, and that will deal with a number of themes that would also be relevant in the maritime dimension. So things like marine spatial planning and coastal and maritime tourism. So there are at least 4 sets of ideas about how what's being done at EU level can be relevant to the work that's being done in the China CEEC context and vice versa. But I do think we need clarity about the terms of engagement and the role of the EU in all of this. As I said earlier, we're here primarily to help the European Union member states who belong to the 16+1 to get the best out of it in line with their membership of the European Union, to make the link. Of course, an awful lot of the business is bilateral, but where it does sometimes have an EU dimension, we're here to try and make sure that we make the link to the 28 member states and that what is done has benefits for all 28 and, of course, for China, in line with the principle of mutual benefit. And actually, this helps to ensure that we have connections that are going to work both practically and legally. So as I said, it's about complementarity, it's about an open platform, it's about respect for the principles of the market economy, it's about compliance with law at both ends, including obviously the acquis communautaire in the Union, and it's about compatibility and synergy with EU policies, notably if you're talking about transport, the 10T obviously. And things like trade facilitation won't work if you don't have an EU-wide approach, because it's about integrity of the single market and the customs union and those kind of things. And I think if we apply those principles, they will strengthen any cooperation that we have. They'll strengthen the infrastructure projects that come into consideration by ensuring that they meet high standards with opportunities for all sides to compete. And that's the importance of the connectivity platform as the place where projects are assessed in line with those principles and then hopefully will go forward and be funded on a joint or coordinated basis. So some of the things that you might want to think about as you move into this new area of 3Cs cooperation, for instance, would be how that links up in the European dimension with the EU strategies on the Black Sea synergy, how it links up with the EU strategy for the Baltic and the EU strategy for the Adriatic, which of course involves countries beyond those that are represented here. All of those things have a transport dimension, a cultural dimension, an SME dimension, a tourism dimension, and an education dimension. And the more we can start thinking in that logic of complementarity and synergy, the better, I think. I'll leave it there. I've probably exceeded my 7 minutes, but thank you for the opportunity to speak again.
Thank you, Mr. Matthews. Yes, indeed, you exceeded the time, but I think it was very interesting to listen on these, all of the elements, how the European Union institutions view the format, and I think it's very important for the further discussions today, and I'm sure we have also some questions related to that. But, thank you now I would like to move to the next speaker, Professor Kon. Please, the floor is yours.
Okay. Good morning. I would like to talk about 3 issues. First, I would like to talk about the characteristics of the 6+1 cooperation framework. In fact, if we look at in the last 5 years, 6+1 already achieved a lot. You know, from every year we have the leaders meeting, we have summit from Bucharest, Belgrade, Suzhou, and right now Riga summit. So the first, I think the 6+1 cooperation framework is quite special. It is neither group, no international organization can encapsulate its characteristics. It is a very special cooperative mechanism. The first characteristic is the equal partnership. Although China is much larger than the Central and East European countries in terms of area, population, and the size of the economy, China sought to build partnership with Central and East European countries on an equal footing. The 6+1 cooperation framework, in which each country is equal partner, can serve as a platform to enhance every country's interests. The second is it's rules institutionalization. In the last 5 years, we can say the 6+1 cooperation framework has evolved in the direction of the rules institutionalization. Institutional arrangement in different mechanisms is not tight knitting. Each country or entity can decide whether or not to join the relevant mechanism for cooperation on voluntary basis. For example, right now we have the high-ranking China-CEE summit, the leaders' meeting at the prime minister level is held yearly. The national coordinator meeting is held twice a year. Institutionalization of the cooperation mechanisms in various areas, usually institutionalization in different areas, takes the forms of association, federation, forum, or networking, which can facilitate the contacts between China and the Central and Eastern country. For example, the China's CEEC Association of Tourist Promotion Institution and Travel Agency is based in Budapest. The sector of the China CEEC contact mechanism for investment promotion agency in Warsaw and Beijing. The China CEEC Joint Chamber of Commerce also has its headquarters in Warsaw and Beijing. The China CEEC Federation for Agricultural Cooperation is located in Sofia. The China CEEC Federation of the Head of Local Government is hosted by the Czech Republic. Also, we have the 6+1 Center for Technology Transfer that is in Slovakia. The China CEEC think tank network worker is in Beijing, in the China Academy of Social Sciences. Also, right now, in the several mechanisms is in the pipeline. For example, the China CEEC Forestry Cooperation coordination mechanism is planned in Slovenia. The China CEEC Federation for Logistics Cooperation is planned in Latvia. The China CEEC Federation for Transport Infrastructure Cooperation is also planned by Serbia. The third characteristic is comprehensive cooperation. This framework covers different fields from political dialogue, economic cooperation, to the people-to-people exchange. The fourth characteristic is a multiple functional arrangement. This framework has multiple functions. On the one hand, the 6+1 framework serves as an instrument for strengthening the bilateral relation between China and the Central and Eastern country. On the other hand, this framework can contribute to the development of China-EU relations. The fifth characteristic is it's a well-planned framework. You know, every year from Bucharest, we have Bucharest guideline, Belgrade guideline, Suzhou guidelines. Last year, we have the medium-term agenda for cooperation. Second, I would like to talk about the 6+1 framework and China-EU cooperation. From China's perspective, China perceives China CEE cooperation as an integral part of the China-EU relations. Among 16 countries from Central and East Europe, 11 countries are already member states of the European Union. The 5 West Balkan states are candidate states of the EU. The China assumes that the strengthening of the China CEE cooperation contributes to the balanced development of China-EU relations. Before the emergence of the 6+1 framework, China had focused its attention on the major power within the EU, for example, Germany, France, and the UK, as well as the EU institutions. The new member states were not in the front burner. China fully understands that the need of the member states to respect the EU laws and the distribution of the competency and responsibility. China CEE cooperation will be within the current institutional framework of the EU. China does not have intention to avoid or circumvent EU laws. China-CEEC cooperation is open and transparent. China always emphasizes the importance of pragmatic cooperation. In fact, there's no hidden agenda in the 6+1 framework. China always supports the European unification, whether it's rain or shine, regards the unified Europe as important part of the multipolar world as one of the factors of stability for global system. There's no any reason to pursue the divide and rope approach toward Europe. Despite the overall initiative came out later than the 6+1 framework, it really gives new dimension to the enhanced China, Central and East European country relations as well as China-EU relations. Europe is quite important in overall initiative. It is the final end of the overall, now every road lead to Europe. The crucial issue is how to finance the development, how to enhance the connectivity. That is crucial two issues for China, Central and East European cooperation and the China-EU cooperation. The EU-China connectivity platform to enhance the synergy between OBO and the EU's connectivity initiatives, such as the Trans-European Transport Network policy, is discussed between China, the EU, and China already joined the EBRD. The European country, several European countries already joined the AIIB. The China Central and East European CEEC Investment Fund already operated. The idea of the China CEEC financial cooperation is in the preparation stage. Concerning the prospect of the 6+1 framework, I think China should cooperate more with the Central and East countries. As this global economy, the International Monetary Fund chief Lagarde warned that the world economy is threatened by the mediocre era of the low growth for a long time, 2 years ago. In fact, last year, she think about the global economy's approach closer to the new mediocre scenario, the risk of the low growth for a long time. This is already a reality, I think. Europe also faces uncertainties. For example, the uncertainty of the Brexit, the uncertainty coming from the threat from the multiple crises within the EU, the uncertainty of the redefining the EU. When China's new normal meet with this global new trend of the European uncertainty, the cooperation is really needed. Despite the greater progress has been made, the potential of cooperation is not fully tapped. It is necessary to think big and start small. We should focus on the micro level, the firms, the regions, and the individuals. Now it is time to do some pragmatic work. For example, sometimes high-flying ambition is needed. The down-to-ground is more important. We should work hard to translate some nice vision into action. Right now, I think how to make the 6+1 format to better serve our interests, I think the 3B is very important, the trust building, bridge building, the future building. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Korn, for the perspective from Beijing. And now we'll turn to my left for perspective from Shanghai. Does the things look the same in Shanghai on the cooperation format between the countries? Dr. Long.
Thank you very much. I assume we share the same point of views from Shanghai and Beijing. So because this topic of the panel is about the relationship between 16+1 and EU, so my presentation will particularly focus on the EU's attitude towards 16+1 and the reason behind this attitude and the way how to change this attitude. So at the beginning, we think EU's attitude is not so friendly, not so supportive. Instead, EU regard 16+1 with suspicion and worried about China's real intention behind it. So from Chinese observation, the EU's concern mainly result from the following three reasons. Firstly, EU worried on internal division because among the 16 members of the 16+1, 11 already EU's member states, And the EU is worried that the economic approaching to China will turn into common political position to China, on China between these member states. So this will weaken the appeal of Brussels and prevent its constancy in foreign policy. Second, the EU worries that it will have any kind of violation of its high standards. The EU has set up relatively much higher standard regulation on environmental protection, labor protection, product quality, nature of capital, etc. So the EU has great concern of any possibility of violating these regulations or lowering the standards with the entering of Chinese investment. If this happens, not only the competitiveness of European companies, but also the legal environment, as well as the EU's value, will take a hit. And thirdly is that the EU worry on the decline of its attractiveness to those non-EU states. There are still 5 countries in the Balkan region that haven't entered into EU. And the EU worries that they may make the 16+1 cooperation as an alternative option since it is becoming more and more difficult for them to join EU. Then let's take a look at how China took measures to change EU's suspicion in the last 4 years. Firstly, China's policy maker put China-EU relationship into a more comprehensive structure. With the establishment and the development of 16+1, a new structure with 3 levels, from the EU to the European subregions and to the individual countries, in a top-down order has been formed. In this structure, the China-EU relation is an overall framework for all the rest levels. 16+1 cooperation is supposed to contribute to the all-round and balanced growth of the China-EU comprehensive strategic partnership. Second, China took every occasion to clarify the purpose of 16+1 cooperation in order to release the EU's attention. For example, when our top leaders visited Brussels in 2014 and 2015, they both explained the Chinese initiatives, including 16+1 and Belt and Road Initiative, and the call for the synergy between China's initiatives and the EU's investment plan for Europe. China also released its second policy paper in 2014 to emphasize that China attached great importance to the EU. Besides, China also keep frequent high-level dialogues or communications with those key member states like France and Germany. They are quite important, both the most important trade partners, not only with China, but also with all these Central and Eastern European countries. So their understanding is also quite important. And also, China take many very concrete and pragmatic measures, like inviting EU to send representatives to attend the 16+1 leaders meeting as observers in recent years. And we also see a lot of academic symposiums or conferences on synergy of Chinese initiatives and EU's strategies held by various Chinese academic institutions, think tanks. So with these efforts, we can see the EU's attitude has been gradually changed, but I think we still need to do more to make the EU an active player, active partner with China in the sub-regional development. So firstly, at the policy level, I think China's side should emphasize more on the role of 16+1 cooperation to the European integration. So our cooperation can promote the socio-economic development of the Central and Eastern European countries, narrow the gap between CEEs and the more advanced Western Europe. And also, this will ultimately help EU realize its goal on internal balanced development. And our cooperation with those non-EU states will also bring more stability and prosperity to this region. Is also in accordance with EU's goal in this sub-region. And the second, in practice, China should make the operation of various projects more transparent. China can learn from those European companies by using more press conference, release more public reports, outreach activities in Brussels, of inviting EU institutions as observer to do the suspicion work. So besides, I think think tanks, legal agency, consulting companies should be encouraged to be more involved in the 16+1 cooperation to provide research and legal service on policy, regulation, culture, etc. So from the European perspective, I think it is necessary for the EU to realize the positive impact of Chinese participation in the European sub-regional cooperation to European integration, especially in the current difficulties. The EU should accept 16+1 cooperation just like it accepted the micro-regional strategy. And second, it is necessary for the EU to understand that 16+1 cooperation is to regard this cooperation not with geopolitical thinking, but instead this cooperation mechanism is just with the purpose to exploring new market for Chinese best quality products such as the high-speed train, etc. So in a word, I think that a more positive interaction between China and EU will definitely help a more efficient and successful cooperation between China and the 16 Central and Eastern European countries. So then I think countries like Latvia can take great role as a bridge. You have very close relationship with EU. The Baltic countries are among the first 10 countries to join into EU in 2004. And you are also member states who benefit most from all those structural funds, cohesion funds, all these instrument tools. So since 2009, the EU accepted a new policy instrument called a micro-regional strategy. So I think among all these different micro-regional strategies, the EU-Baltic micro-regional strategy is the most successful and pioneering one. So I think with the cooperation with Latvia and other Baltic countries, China and EU can understand with each other more and find more opportunities to dock with each other's strategies. And I hope that Latvia can also be the bridge for the cooperation between China and those Nordic countries, because you have very long-term tradition and good cooperation with these countries. So that I think Baltic countries can help China join to open the Nordic market. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Long. I think it was very interesting input statement with some provocative elements, and I think it's very good to know your perception, what is in fact the perception of the European Union. So maybe there are some differences, but I think it's very good always to understand and learn what you think that we think as the European Union. So thank you very much. And now we move forward to Hungary, a very active member of the 16+1 format. So Mr. Marton, the floor is yours for your input statement.
Thank you very much. Quite a long jump from Shanghai to Budapest now. There is a gentle reminder on the table that I should speak closer to the microphone, so I hope that everybody hears me. Ladies and gentlemen, Your Excellencies, it's a great honor for me to speak about the importance of the cooperation between China and the CEE countries. Let me underline that the Hungarian government is highly committed to strengthening diplomatic ties, deepening cultural relationships, and exploiting potential business opportunities of mutual benefit, both with Central Eastern European countries and with, of course, one of the most important players in global politics and economy, China. I am also proud that in the recent years, the Institute for Foreign Affairs and Trade, the institution that I represent, has succeeded in expanding its international partnership network and in acting as an interface between the world of diplomacy and the public discourse. If we look back over the past years, we can notice a very rapid and complex transformation of the world economy, like new free trade agreements, closer regional economic cooperation, digitalization, just to mention a few, on the one hand, and three serious global challenges on the other, like migration crisis, Brexit, climate change, social challenges. I believe there is no coincidence that one can observe similar responses to these challenges. Both China and the European countries have accelerated domestic structural reforms, provided incentives for innovation-led economic growth, and intensified foreign relationships with other parts of the world. Close and coordinated cooperation between regions and countries play a key role in tackling the above-mentioned challenges. Solid partnership based on mutual trust are thus greatly appreciated in this changing world. Indeed, CEE countries have historically close relationship with China, which facilitates mutual understanding despite the great geographic distance and differences in size. Furthermore, one of the lessons that we can learn from the successful regional cooperation of the four Visegrad countries, Poland, Slovakia, Czech Republic, and Hungary, is that mutual respect, trust, and common interest can provide a solid foundation for long-term and win-win cooperation. Mr. Matthews mentioned 4 different areas that are on the agenda, so let me also continue with underlining different 4 important features, namely civilization, cooperation, competitiveness, and curiosity, the so-called 4 C's, which could be the key characteristics of the fruitful collaboration between China and the CEE countries. There are a lot of C's in my speech now. So about the civilization. China is one of the world's longest historical civilization, one that has enriched mankind's heritage and continues to be one of the driving global forces today. The ancient Silk Road played a key role regarding the relationship between the Chinese and the European civilization, but the Silk Road was not only a trade route via the Eurasian continent, but it also enabled the flows of philosophy, knowledge, religious views, culture, and innovation. Following the spirit of the ancient Silk Road, the One Belt, One Road initiative provides a unique opportunity to strengthen the connectivity between China and Europe. Nowadays, CEEs also look forward to the reinvention of the Great Link, and I believe that this region plays an active role with providing practical content for enriching this initiative. Owing to its key geostrategic position, Central and Eastern Europe was often the crossroads of empires. The turbulent history of this region has resulted in a unique ethnic, social, and political diversity on the one hand, and there is still room for economic convergence on the other hand. Furthermore, let me underline that the principles of inclusiveness, mutual respect, and peaceful and win-win cooperation are truly important for both of our region and China. About cooperation, the second C. As far as the cooperation between China and the CEEs is concerned, let me underline some concrete examples. Undoubtedly, one of the most important flagship projects is the modernization of the Budapest-Belgrade railway line. The Sea-Land Express line will not slowly ensure a fast railway connection between the port of Piraeus and Western Europe, but it can also create a successful model for future regional connectivity to facilitate further cross-border infrastructure investments. The Hungarian, the Serbian, and the Chinese government are strongly committed to implementing these strategic projects, and they make enormous efforts to overcome all of the difficulties that may occur in case of any mega projects like this. Fortunately, the Chinese-Hungarian economic relationship is also intensively improving. Let me remind you that Hungary was the first European country who signed a memorandum of understanding with China to make joint efforts to create the Silk Road economic belt. Numerous Chinese companies, corporations produce and operate their regional service centers in Hungary. Let me mention Huawei and ZTE from the IT sector, or Wanhua from the chemical industry. New export opportunities have also opened for Hungarian companies concerning meat, dairy, and wine products. Traditionally, the food industry is one of the main engines of Hungarian export to China. The financial cooperation between Hungary and China is also very intensive. The Bank of China opened its CEE regional center in Budapest. Hungary was the first country in the region that issued 1 billion yuan government bonds on the Chinese market. Moreover, the first renminbi clearing center in Central Europe has also been set up in Budapest. This was the 5th European center after London, Paris, Frankfurt am Main, and Luxembourg. Certainly, there are other numerous fields where the Chinese-Hungarian partnership becomes deeper and more intensive. Concerning the people-to-people relationship, Air China's direct flight between the Chinese and Hungarian capital, and as Professor Kung already mentioned, the Budapest-based China CEEC Association of Tourist Promotion Agency plays significant roles. About competitiveness. In terms of GDP growth, China is one of the major engines in the world economy, while the CEE region is one of the most dynamic regions within Europe. Easy access to the huge internal market of the EU, central geographic location, which is appropriate for establishing intermodal hubs, logistics centers, industrial parks, together with qualified staff, relatively low energy and labor costs. All these make the CEE region attractive to foreign investors. Is it therefore no wonder that a number of Chinese companies have already decided to pursue investment in these countries? Although Professor Kung mentioned that China treats the countries of our region equally, certainly our countries may sometimes feel that they are competitors to each other. National governments provide generous incentives and supportive business climate like tax allowances, exemptions, promotion for research and development and training, flexible labor market, education system adapting to the needs of companies. And governments closely monitor each other's trade and investment promotion policies, of course. However, I strongly believe that Central and Eastern European countries always remain committed to a deeply held value of fair competition, and this also ensures security for foreign investors in our region. Curiosity as the last C. It is in an increasingly globalized world, understanding different viewpoints of current events is of vital importance. Sometimes differences regarding historical experiences, cultures, languages, way of thinking can complicate the cooperation. Nevertheless, strengthening people-to-people links can help to overcome these difficulties. In this sense, the 16+1 framework of cooperation between our countries and think tanks facilitates the exchange of ideas, expertise, and different interpretations. Of course, the curiosity of the two regions' people stands far beyond the academic realm. Instead, it crosses over into day-to-day relations, trade, tourism, education, and all sorts of cultural exchanges. To conclude, historic, political, and economic ties are vital, but be that with the EU as a whole, the CEE region, or Hungary in particular. But it's also important to recognize that the true spirit of cooperation emerges not only through high-level agreements and trade, but also in a strong connection between people, whether they are politicians, business people, diplomats, researchers, or everyday citizens. This is precisely why I believe that the Riga summit can serve as a vital forum for the exchange of ideas and for the deepening of ties between China and the Central Eastern European region. I would like to therefore once again thank for the invitation, and we are ready to discuss the issues later on. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Martin. We will turn to Q&As quite soon after the last intervention. But before I give the floor to Mr. Neljas, I would also like to put a few sentences in the field, because we had Hungary, which is quite active partnering on bilateral level with China and also in 16+1 format, but the situation is very diverse in the format. And one thing is that Estonia quite often has considered it rather a northern country, so not that much Eastern European country. And we here in Latvia, together with Dr. Liu Zaukoi, with the research on among the students of political science in Latvia, what do they know about 16+1 format? In October 2016, 57% of the students knew nothing about such format. They had never heard about that. And 71% had never heard that there will be a summit of 16+1 in Riga in 1 month. So this is also, you can say that maybe the teachers, the lecturers should work better, but maybe that's also in a way indicator how the format is perceived here in the north. So is this situation similar in Estonia, or it is different? So Mr. Neljas, the floor is yours.
Thank you. I will start with some more general observations. For example, that today we could see in 21st century that there is direct connection between European prosperity and Asian prosperity. In light of economic weights that Asia and especially China represents for the EU, and vice versa, well-developed economic relations are prerequisites for our common prosperity. Estonia has the view that the EU should deepen trade and investment with China, seeking a level playing field, appropriate intellectual property rights protection, greater cooperation on high-end technologies, and dialogue on economic reform. The China-initiated 60+1 platform is a very important complementary tool for developing EU and China relations. We could say that this format has been moderately successful with some important infrastructure projects developed in Central and Eastern European countries. I think there are perspectives of 16+1 format cooperation in enhancing cooperation with EU and as a whole with China. We should look forward to the synergies possible between EU-China strategic partnership and 16+1 format. Developing transit corridors is one such possible avenue. It is important that both sides in this cooperation take into account each other's priorities. So far, most of projects realized have reflected Chinese priorities. So CEE countries like Estonia would like to see more greenfield investments, increased exports, and of course more Chinese tourists to develop human-to-human contacts, which first of all are able to create jobs and improve economies. Furthermore, it's important that this cooperation between CEE countries and China follows general EU standards and rules, and the platform is seen as a part of EU-China general relationship. CEE countries, EU and China should act as a key stakeholders and will inevitably need to engage more, not less, in negotiations and coordination of policies to manage China's rapidly growing interest in our region. Therefore, a 16+1 format is set to grow in importance over coming years. CEE could be seen as being a bridge between China and Western Europe, in both geographical and a metaphorical sense. Cooperation between China and Central Eastern European countries, particularly developing the region's transportation infrastructure, will both enable physical connectivity and promote an economic integration between China and Europe. While the depth of economic engagement is uneven across the region, some CEE countries, especially one could mention non-EU members, have seen arrival of Chinese investments over the last few years. There is a growing portfolio of Chinese big-ticket infrastructure and development projects, equity investments and acquisitions in the region, which have certainly helped to develop economies of CEE countries. At the same time, there has not been as rapid increase in trade and Chinese investments as compared to period before the 16+1 platform was created. One recent development has been China's goal to integrate European countries into a Chinese Belt and Road initiative, which aims to link East Asia and Western Europe and everything in between via a network of interconnected infrastructure, railroad, port, energy, finance, and telecommunications. It's important that 16+1 platform and Belt and Road initiative are developed in close connection, with significant emphasis on infrastructure construction between EU and China through CEE countries. To say some words about Estonia, so Estonia adopted on government level in 2011 an Asia program, which shows how important Estonia sees China and other fast-developing Asian countries for its economy. Our main goals, as established in this strategy, was tourism, export and foreign investments, which should be developed. Estonia, of course, is also interested in being included in those developing transit corridors between China and the EU, including an Estonian railway and ports as part of transit routes between China and the EU. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So we stop here with the input statements and we open the floor for questions, both in the audience and also online. And I see the first hands here, two members of the parliament, and I would like to start with Mr. Atis Leinš, who is the member of the parliament and the Foreign Affairs Committee, and he's also the honorary director of the Latvian Institute of International Affairs. And microphone is coming. There are two microphones coming, so you can choose the best.
In other words, that European companies cannot buy into the Chinese market, and Chinese companies can easily buy into the American and the European market. So the Chinese market is closer. And the other question is, well, this is probably coming up with my committee. This is an issue that soon perhaps become a directive or regulation of the European Union. So I would like to hear your viewpoints on that. And to give you a concrete example, for example, you want to leave this Latvian investments in China are bigger than China's investments in Latvia. And that is because we cannot sell our cheese to China. So we have to invest and build cheese factories in China, and then I suppose it's dry milk is sent to China, and then the cheese is made and sold in China. So this is an example of reciprocity. How would you react to that? A small country like Latvia has bigger investments in China than a big country, like China has small investments in China. So these 2 points, especially I would like to hear from Mr. Matthews, because this has been written about in the Financial Times and the German papers and all the quality papers about this reciprocity. Have you seen this on your screen yet, or is it coming?
Thank you, Director Leinš. We will gather several questions and then we will move forward. There was a hand in front. Mr. Sergejs Potapkins, also a member of the Latvian Parliament and a member of the Foreign Affairs.
Hello, and also chairman of Latvia-China Cooperation Group. So I have 2 questions. First to Mr. Matthews, but is directly connected with the speech of Ms. Long. So we, Eastern European countries, feel some resistance from the big European players like Germany and France, and they claims that actually 16+1 dialogue splits Europe, and we cannot have this dialogue as a countries that is a part of European Union and countries are not part of European Union. So we shouldn't have this independent dialogue and have to accept only EU-China relations, but at the same time France, for example, are signing bilateral treaty of common investment with China, and I see some double standards here. And my question is, should we still wait for some resistance from European big players, and do we really have this threat that 16+1 capability will be limited from Brussels or from Berlin? And the second question is about Belt and Road initiative of Chinese government. This initiative covers all Eurasian continent and actually cover two integrational spaces, is European Union and Eurasian Economic and Custom Union, where the main players are Russia and Kazakhstan, and taking into the view that relation between Europe and Russia now at the bottom point, my question is how China see their role in this normalization between two big spaces, because Belt and Road should be harmonized to have a sustainable development of this initiative. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Potapkins. I see there is another hand.
Thank you very much. My name is Alexandru Georgescu. I am a think tanker from Romania, from the Risk Foundation, and I have just a comment to make regarding something that Deputy Director Long Jing mentioned. I wanted to state the fact that regarding the issue of think tanks and how they can improve the relations between China and the European Union and reduce the anxieties and the suspicions in Brussels regarding the goals of this cooperation initiative, we suggested, my organization suggested several times in China during meetings with SIS, with the China Institutes for Contemporary International Relations, with the China Academy of Social Sciences and so on, that Chinese think tanks should have a permanent representation in Brussels, that they should have permanent access and permanent contact with European think tanks and European institutions. And this is a model that has worked very well in the European Union. For instance, Romania's own trajectory towards the West after 1989 was also based on permanent contact with German and American think tanks that implanted themselves in Romania, the Friedrich Ebert Stiftung, Konrad Adenauer, German Marshall Fund and its Black Sea Trust, Aspen Institute, and so on. And this could be a very useful way of ensuring that the Chinese perspectives are represented in Brussels, that permanent dialogue is sustained, and that political issues that always crop up when politicians discuss are sidestepped through discussions between specialists. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for the useful comment, and I think we'll also reflect on that. And there is a question in the middle. You have the microphone.
Yeah, I come from China University. I'm the professor of Wanli Zhejiang University. And I'm also the president of China and the CEEC Cooperation Research Institute. I have two questions to Kong Tianping, Mr. Kong Tianping. As we know, China and the CEEC investment and trade exposition was held 2 times in Ningbo City. The third exposition will still held in Ningbo next year. So what do you think of the China CEEC investment and trade exposition? And any ideas and suggestions on how to make a better job of next exposition? Thank you.
Thank you very much for your question. Please have the microphone.
Thank you very much. Good morning. My name is Justyna Szczulik. I represent the Polish Institute for International Affairs from Warsaw. I have a very short question. I would like to ask our panelists if they could provide us with some examples of the successes of the 16+1 cooperation of this 4 years of the establishment. Could you give us examples of the success stories, some projects that have been already completed? So the one question, and the second one about the failures. If you could provide us with some examples of some failures, so as an example, just to maybe we can improve our cooperation in coming years.
Thank you very much. Very straight and clear question. We have a question over there.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Michał Makocki. I'm senior analyst at the EU Institute for Security Studies in Paris. So I have 2 questions. One to Kong Tianping. So actually, I welcome your remarks about Chinese support to the multipolar world and the EU role in it. But I have a question to you as an analyst. how do you see, what are the benefits for China to engaging European countries in different subgroupings? Apart from the CEE China cooperation, we hear as well that China would like to have a similar mechanisms to engage as well Nordic countries and Mediterranean countries. So I would say, my question would be, what are the benefits for China to engaging European countries in those subgroupings rather than at the level of the EU? And as well, I have another question to Longjing. You mentioned some suspicions about disrespect of the rules by the Chinese companies, and perhaps you had on your mind the not so successful highway construction in Poland by Chinese SOE. And I remember actually I was at this investment forum in Beijing when a representative of this company was mentioning a very negative business attitude in Poland towards Chinese investments because by the Polish law and by the EU regulations, the company was required to build bridges over the highway for some protected species. And this representative of this company regarded this as an anti-Chinese act which undermines business opportunities for Chinese investors in infrastructure in Europe. And since you mentioned that you have done a lot of outreach towards European institutions to actually to alleviate those suspicions, I wonder actually if same outreach has been made inside China between research community and the government to actually inform all the different institutions, companies, policy banks which take part in the different mechanisms between EU and China about the different rules and regulations at the national and the European level. Thank you.
Thank you for your question. I think we have time for the very last question before the panelists will turn to the answers. Is there a question, somebody that would like to ask? Or I see that there are no hands up, and I would like to proceed in the way that I will give the opportunity to all of the panelists to reflect on the issues that were brought here in the audience, and as we saw, there is quite an interest, and there are quite different thinkings on the successes or non-successes of the format, and I would like to start with Mr. Matthew. There were quite many questions about the European Union, how it perceives the 16+1 format, and then how open is in fact China, if we are expecting that the European Union should be open to the investment from China. Other powers, is that China that's open? So looking forward to your answers.
Okay, well, I'll try and address myself to the two questions asked by the honourable parliamentarians. One was about, I think, as you said, transparency and EU attitudes to China CEEC cooperation, and the other was about reciprocity. So let me take the question of EU attitudes. I mean, I agree with our Shanghai colleague on the panel that there's been an evolution over time, and I think that the evolution has been in a positive direction, and that's because, in fact, part of the whole point of having the EU institutions present as an observer in the format, by request both of China and the 16 members at the European end, is actually to improve the information flow. So although I said at the beginning of my presentation that I didn't want to talk in terms of gaps and bridges, that is the bridge. Because what we do in practice is help to make sure that there is a framework, and that's in the communication that I referred to and in the Council conclusions, which helps all of us deal with the 16+1 in a way that's beneficial both to the EU 28 and to China. So I actually think that the way that you described what's happening was true perhaps 2, 3, 4 years ago, but in fact is no longer quite so true. I do think there's a lot to be done still on the transparency front. That includes transparency, to be honest, within the 16 as well. You know, some of these memoranda of understanding that have been referred to, I think, ought properly to be matters of public record so that everybody can see what's in them, and that would reduce perhaps some of the competitive impulses that our Hungarian colleague referred to. And I think that would also increase confidence in the whole structure in terms of concerns which have indeed been expressed, and this is true, about compatibility with state aid legislation, with competition policy, with the various environmental and other standards that investments need to comply with. And far better that that be dealt with up front in an honest and candid way than that investments run into trouble later on in a way that causes legal or other difficulties. So I think that is actually about confidence building, and in the end China wants to invest in the European Union. As I said, that's very welcome because it's a place where you may not be getting stratospheric returns compared to some places in the world, but where you have the rule of law, your property rights are guaranteed, and you're going to get a safe return in a place where you have legal protection. So there should be no need for quote-unquote sweetheart deals which bypass the normal structures. You know, China's got plenty of competitive and globally competitive companies that can be successful bidders in themselves or as part of consortia. So that would be my answer to the first question. I think we've had a build-up. I think that indeed there were a number of member states that don't belong to the 16+1 that wanted to address that transparency issue, and I think that we have largely addressed that issue. And if you, as I am, are a student of what member states say bilaterally in their joint political statements with China, you will see that in the same way as the 16+1 documents do, the most recent political declarations between Germany, between the UK and France bilaterally with China very clearly reference the EU-China relations framework, including the EU-China 2020 agenda that I referred to in my presentation. So that's what I would say. I think we've been in a gradual process of trying to clear up misunderstandings and transparency glitches, let me put it that way. On the reciprocity side, I think there is a growing debate about this, and you can see it. There's a little microcosm of it, if you care to read it, in a chunky paragraph on page 7 of the China communication that was issued on the 22nd of June, so the EU one. I think we are not at the stage yet of having a consolidated EU view on this, but the reason that the debate has started is really, I think, to do with first of all, what the Honourable Member referred to, which is a lack of reciprocity in EU-China investment relations in terms of access to the Chinese market. That's to do with joint venture requirements, ownership restrictions. Excuse me, that's to do with joint venture requirements, it's to do with ownership restrictions. So the basic problem as you described it, which is that European companies cannot operate in China in the way that Chinese companies can operate as investors in Europe. And it's actually the comprehensive agreement on investment that I referred to that is designed to, and we call it in the communication, rebalance that in the interests of both sides. Because we have a politically brittle situation in terms of acceptance of free trade in the European Union. It's still very much the view of the EU institutions and a majority of member states that that's where we ought to be. But all member states, and we can see the illustration of that, are having, you know, increasing challenges in terms of explaining the benefits of that to their populations. And so it's very, very important that we have, you know, robust market access guarantees in that kind of agreement. And I think the specific thing that has caused concern, and you noted, I think, the FT articles which were really referring to German domestic politics, has been the question of the degree to which some Chinese investment is leveraged either with subsidized funding or comes via state-owned enterprises who may not be subject to the same market disciplines that European companies investing in China would be. And I think that's where the debate is coming from.
Thank you very much for your answers. And now I'd like to turn to Professor Kwon. And could you also please address those issues also from the top, asking what in your perception are the success stories? Which are those here in the 16 countries?
I have so many challenging questions. Because of the time limit, I will make a very brief comment about some of the issue. Concerning my Estonia friend raised about why China is a big country. There's a very limited investment in Estonia and as well as in other countries. I think one of the reasons is, in fact, Chinese enterprises is still at the initial stage of internationalization. Just more than 25 years ago, when Central and East European country changed its economic system, at that time, Chinese enterprises did not have the capacity to do international business. So right now, your market is already taken by some big players, for example, Germany, France, and other European countries. That is one reason. Right now, we are the latecomer right now. On the other hand, I think the Chinese enterprises maybe they are frightened by the different cultural, different investment environment, and as well as some EU's very strict regulation. I think right now some successful Chinese enterprise, for example, Huawei, they really very active in Poland as well as in Hungary. I think they are Chinese enterprises right now is catching up. I think concerning my colleague from Ningbo, I think Ningbo government really did a lot of things to promote the cooperation between China and the Central and Eastern countries, especially the ministerial meeting as well as the trade fair. It really promoted the visibility of the Central and Eastern European countries' products. I think. The Ningbo government, in fact, is very active to promote the economic cooperation. It put a lot of resources and energy to do that. In fact, for the sustainable development, I suggest the Ningbo government should find out some partner within the Central and Eastern country. They can jointly share some of the resources and some of the jointly explore the possibility between China and the Central and Eastern country. Concerning another question is about the Central and Eastern countries quite divergent, different. For example, Nordic, the Baltic states is quite different from the Visegrad group. Also, the West Balkan states is quite different from the Visegrad group. So I think because of the 6+1 framework, we can make full use of every country's comparative advantage. I think, for example, Latvia is a Baltic state. They can use its location for developing some kind of cooperation between China over the logistics and some more transport facilities, something like that. Okay.
Thank you very much, Professor Kong. Now I'd like to turn to my left again to Dr. Long. You had quite questions here, and I think you had indeed a very interesting speech that provoked some of the reactions. We had already some of the answers and different opinions. So what could you please add?
Okay. Thank you very much. I will try my best to answer these questions. So firstly, the question about Chinese protection of its own market. So actually, when we had a meeting in China with the participants of Chinese investors, they also have the same complaint that it is very difficult to enter into the European market. So when they also attend those bid in individual European countries, they hardly can win from these bids. So they hardly can get these projects, though the cost, their price is much lower, and though their quality is also as good as those European competitors. So they also raise the same question, is that the European market is also protected by some kind of unwritten rules like that. So I think that's why our think tanks need to do more to study. But from my personal perspective, I don't think that we could get a very easy conclusion that the Chinese market is highly protected just because it is very difficult to enter into the market. Sometimes it is the issue of the competitiveness of the company. So for example, many many companies of the Central and Eastern European countries, they try to have more trade on like wines or other agricultural products into Chinese market, but they just find it's very difficult to open the market. So I don't think it is because of the protection of the market, just because maybe there are still lack of enough publicities, enough information for those Chinese consumers. So I should say there are a lot of different reasons behind these difficulties, not only the protection of the market. Yes, of course, in some industries, China has much higher, much stronger restrictions of the entry into its own market, but not all of them. So it depends on what kind of products the European companies are going to provide. So it's a quite complicated question. I don't think it is very easy to answer just with one conclusion that it is highly protected by Chinese government. So this is my answer to this question. And the second is about the successful example of this mechanism. I think the most outstanding, obvious achievements of the last 3 or 4 years, I think it is the promotion and the upgrading of the political bilateral relationship between China and many individual Central and Eastern European countries. This is very obvious. For example, our relationship with Serbia, our relationship with Romania, with especially Czech Republic this year, it's kind of like a breakthrough of the bilateral relationship in history between the two countries. So it's very obvious that the political relationship between China and the Central Eastern European countries has get very highly promoted and upgraded in these 3 years. In terms of those economic, more visible projects, I think it depends on which country you are looking at. If you look at the cooperation between China and Serbia, you will find a lot of very concrete projects. Some are already accomplished. For example, the bridge built on the Danube River, and also the upgrading of one. I think it's the power plants there. So there are also a lot of highway, some highway high-speed highway projects, and also we have some projects just at the stage of launching. For example, the very famous Hungary and Serbia railway project. As I know, in the end of last year, the Serbia section was just launched. So we hope that the Hungarian session will start as soon as possible, so we can make this project accomplished within 2 years, according to our in accordance with our plan. So this is some very successful projects. But frankly speaking, I agree with you that not all these countries we can make a kind of accomplishment list, this achievement list with all the individual countries. Some are with a very full content list, but some maybe not. So that's why I think we should keep the development of this mechanism to find more opportunities of the cooperation with different countries. I think one of the good way to solve this problem is that we should find the different priorities of the different countries. Just like someone talked about that, it should not always be the Chinese priority to seek for. Sometimes we should also try to find what are the priorities of the development of these individual countries and take their priorities into our consideration and find the what they really want to develop in the future. So this is the second to the answer to someone about the successful successful example. So okay.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Long. I think it was very comprehensive and frank answers. But I think Hungary has many examples of achievements in the 16+1 format. Please.
Yes, before we go to the success stories, just some words about the situation mentioned by Mr. Potapkins with our Western European partners. To be honest, I don't really understand these concerns from our partners from that side, because I think in such a huge economic and political complex organization like the European Union, it should be natural that there are different levels of cooperation. At the same time, I strongly believe that this kind of initiative, I mean, different levels of cooperations, strengthen also the European Union itself, because it makes its members stronger. I think you would not blame Hungary for not giving emphasis about this criticism about the European Union nowadays, but you should never forget that this criticism is not against the European Union, but exactly on the opposite. It's for the European Union. Our approach is that we believe that if the member states of the European Union are stronger, it can make the whole European Union stronger. Two examples, how can the different level of cooperation work? The example of Slovakia and Hungary with a quite heavy history behind our back. Tools from the European level like the Schengen zone, cross-border cooperations, common EU regulations helped. And the second level was the level of the Visegrad cooperation, where we could make it on the bilateral way. So the European Union tools and the regional tools put these countries together. Now there's a daily contact, a vivid cross-border cooperation between these countries. So I believe that could function where a regional cooperation can make the whole European Union stronger. We believe that this should be the approach that we should take in terms of the 16+1 format. About the success stories, I don't want my answer to be to sound very political, but I think that the fact that 16 competitors with sometimes quite heavy history together, so we sit together, this is a success. And this fact that we sit together at the table and try to work together with a partner of a really different size, political system, culture, and economy, it forces these 16 countries to synchronize themselves. Of course, it takes time. Whether these success stories that was mentioned by Dr. Long, or what I tried to also mention in my presentation, the presence of the Bank of China, the tourist agency, the Belgrade Budapest Railway, whether these success stories could have been done without the 16+ format on the bilateral way, we don't know. But I think and I believe that the possibility of meeting together creates occasions to meet, and of course, on the margin of such a meeting, we can have bilateral contacts as well. But I truly believe that this kind of cooperation strengthens the possibility for the region to cooperate with China, also because usually bilateral ways are not so easy to come over the high-level political way. Now we are sitting in a think tank network meeting. There are meetings between academics, between tourist agencies, higher education institutions. So the 16+1 format can be, in my opinion, a tool where real high-level meetings can be put down to the real level of action. But of course, I agree with the sort of the concern that could be heard from your question that, yes, it's time to take even more concrete actions. That's right, but I think we are on the way to do that.
Thank you very much again for this very comprehensive viewpoint, Mr. Neles.
Well, I start with the reciprocity issue. I think that certainly we need reciprocity in developing relations between China and the EU, between China and Central Eastern European countries. And I think that certainly 16+1 format is complementary to general EU-China relations and can develop best if all European requirements are taken into account and if it's fully transparent to different partners. That's all.
Thank you. And if you were asked what are the success stories of China and 16+1 Estonia, would you have an answer?
Actually, I don't have a very good answer, but I could say that trade between countries has developed. There are more Chinese tourists in China, in Estonia, but I am not sure how much we could link it with 16+1 network.
Thank you, Mr. Nellis. And we have slightly exceeded our time. So we heard quite different views, both from the level of the European Union, how the European Union considers China, how China considers the European Union and the 16+1 format, and what we hear, both from Hungary and Estonia, how we see the format and what are the perspectives. And I will make no conclusions here because we have still two panels. The next panel after the lunch break will be devoted to the transportation and interconnectivity issues, and the last but not least will be devoted to people-to-people contacts. And now I would like to announce lunch break for 1 hour. Please be back, and please join me in applause to our speakers.